Afternoon. Welcome to another presentation of our 11th annual Sacred Sites Open House Celebration. I'm Peg Breen, president of the New York Landmarks Conservancy. We started our open house as an annual weekend of in-person tours of religious buildings throughout the state. We want people to be aware of their architecture and history, as well as the social service and cultural programs they provide to their communities. Thanks to COVID, this is our second virtual open house. The advantage is that our tours can reach so many more people, and participants get to see much more than they could walking around in person. We have a great treat today, a visit to beautiful Woodlawn Cemetery in the Bronx. It's a National Historic Landmark and contains extraordinary mausoleums. Woodlawn has embarked on a study of their exceptional stained glass collection, reportedly the largest stained glass survey ever. The theme of our open house this year is With You in Spirit, a perfect title for going to the cemetery. And the spirits of Woodlawn may be with us, but our guides through the tour are in the flesh. We have Susan Olson, Woodlawn's Director of Historical Services, Brianne Van Voorst from Liberty Stained Glass Conservation, and Drew Anderson, the stained glass conservator from the Metropolitan Museum. They'll be happy to answer questions after the presentation. Please put your questions into the chat and we'll get to them. So Susan, Brianne, take it away.
Okay. I guess I need to share my screen, but I want to give a shout out to all my Woodlawn peeps. I'm glad to see so many of our research volunteers have joined us today. So thanks guys for your contributions to this, as well as being here today. So there we go. Okay, I think we're ready to roll here. As Peg introduced, Woodlawn is a National Historic Landmark. We were declared a landmark in 2011. And why didn't it go forward? Oh, there we go. And as you can see from the bronze plaque issued by the National Park Service, it was declared that Woodlawn has the largest and finest collection of funerary art. And for those of you who know me, you know I'm a little hard-edged. I cried when I unpacked this thing. I could not believe that the National Park Service made such a declaration about a place. It's usually assumed to be or could be considered, but they said, we have the largest and finest collection of funeral art. And my boss at the time, John Toll, said, I guess that means we need to take care of it. And so all of a sudden, we became stewards of just a phenomenal collection. In our application, we know that our friends at the mighty Greenwood was considered one of the great rural cemeteries. We know our friends at Spring Grove in Cincinnati became a landmark for the landscape lawn design. We were the first one that was based upon the collection there. We had over 240 significant features listed in our application. Those are the things that contribute to why you should be a landmark. And with those, we focused on the accomplished sculptors that have worked here, from Daniel Chester French to Alexander Archipenko. Our notable architects, we're very pleased that we've got 13 contributions from McKinn, Mead and White, James Gamble Rogers, Peabody and Stearns. And the thing that's most remarkable, we have a Sir Edwin Lutyens design monument here. And for those who love the English country houses, that was a shocker. And of course, we listed our stained glass artisans that we knew at the time. Louis Comfort Tiffany, John Lafarge, Helen Maitland, and Daniel Cartier has actually been a recent discovery. We were hesitant, though, to list the stained glass because we felt it would produce a shopping list, that this is a collection that we are very protective of, worried about theft, worried about resale. And so not all of our windows made it into our National Historic Landmark application. And let's see. Now you got my spreadsheet. What did I do wrong? Let's see if it goes. There we go. So here you have a 1921 aerial view of Woodlawn. What we are known internationally for, besides our jazz greats, is we have 1,321 private family mausoleums. It is the largest collection of mausoleums in the country. They date from 1867 to 2019. The real heyday was 1880 to 1920. And one of our volunteers, Dawn Connolly, counted the windows, and we know we have well over 1,200 windows here at Woodlawn. Initially, we felt it was important that we document this collection, and with a grant from the National Trust for Historic Preservation, a crazy graduate student, art historian, Lee Sandstead, and a phenomenal photographer. It took him 2 years to photograph all the mausoleums and all the windows. And there you see a representation. Lee took 17,000 photographs here at Woodlawn. From that, it became obvious to us that we had just a significant collection here. And with 900 linear feet of records, our good friend Charles Warren showed up one day with a little sheet. He was doing a monograph on Carrera and Hastings, and he said, "Do you have any records associated with these?" And of course, I said, "We've got files." And he said, "What?" And it was then that I learned that many architects, sculptors, and artists destroy their original designs and drawings so that they're not replicated. And Janet Parks, then the archivist and curator of Avery, came out to Woodlawn and said, "We'll take it." Wonderful things from so many New York artisans, as well as international, here at Woodlawn. And from there, we produced an exhibition at Columbia, as well as this beautiful book called Sylvan Cemetery. Charles Warren, architectural historian, was a major contributor to this work. Our good friend Andrew Dolkart did a lot about the landscaping and basically the context of Woodlawn. Cynthia Mills from the Smithsonian contributed the sculpture chapter, and Alice Cooney Frelinghuysen from the Met was kind enough to do the stained glass. And it was at that point that we knew we had a very diverse collection of stained glass that was worth both study by scholars, enjoyment by the public, and additional investigation. So as far as our records go, there's really two things that serve as the Rosetta Stone for Woodlawn. Those are interment records and then our foundation orders. And on our Zoom call today is Ginny Michaels, who has put 125,000 records in a database so that we know who the artisans were that made our monuments. She and Dawn Conley worked for 5 years on this project so that we knew who contributed to Woodlawn, because when you pour the foundation, the maker of the monument is on these orders. So as you can see from this document, we know that George M. Cohan had Louis Comfort Tiffany build his mausoleum. I want to thank our contributor to this project, Meredith Trim of the Ventus Foundation. Not only did she support our study of Tiffany Stone and his monument company, but she provided us with the support for the pilot project for this study. So needless to say, if George M. Cohan commissioned Tiffany to build him a mausoleum, there's a good clue that there's going to be a Tiffany window inside. These are some of the things that you will find if you go to Avery to look at the files. There's correspondence from the monument makers, there's blueprints and drawings of the designs, but unfortunately, there is very little relating to the windows at Woodlawn. Decorative elements in mausoleums, doors, mosaic ceilings, decorative floors, and stained glass windows were selected by the owners, the monument makers, and often the architects would dictate to their client what was appropriate. So with that, we were sort of out in the blue. Every now and then there will be something that indicates or provides attribution to the artist, but for the most part, we're on a hunt all the time. This wonderful door that you see here for the Gates Mausoleum is a Robert Aitken work. It fortunately is signed, so it's easy to tell who made the thing. This is the John Kennedy mosaic. Kennedy, who was the man who really gave us the New York Public Library, and we have no clue who did this spectacular mosaic. The mosaics are a challenge. We do have 13 Guastavino ceilings, but we don't know who the artists were that provided those designs and laid those tiles. Here you see samples of ceilings and floors here at Woodlawn. Again, lots of decorative design, but we do not know who the artisans are. As far as window attribution goes, these are the things that we have been turning to with the hopes it would provide us with the names of both the glass house that provided it and the artist who created the design itself. So what we know is that we've found some information at Avery in our archival collections. Advertising catalogs have been very helpful. Exhibition catalogs, magazine publications, published books. Every now and then there's a surprise reference material where something will pop up that it's like, Eureka, I've found something. The relationship with the builders and the glass companies, the signatures on the window, and then what we are doing today, which is the physical assessment of the collection. So here's a situation where there was something in the Avery collection. When Mrs. Harbeck decided to build her mausoleum, she of course wanted Tiffany to do her windows, and here's her calling cards. And of course she had to request and send this card to our superintendent to please let the representative of Tiffany into the cemetery to her mausoleum. So this not only let us know or confirmed in writing that it's a Tiffany window, the window is signed conveniently, but it also let us know that Woodlawn was a gated community, that unless the lot owner provided you with information, or provided the staff here with information, you weren't allowed in. And needless to say, here's a close-up of a portion of this enormous window. And I don't think there's any question who our artisans are as far as the Harbeck Mausoleum. Advertising cards have been invaluable. Fortunately, our engineer for many decades, Mr. Doolittle, saved everything. This is Hamlin Q. French. He was the major mausoleum maker from the 1870s until his death in 1912. He worked out of New Rochelle, New York. The Smith Granite Company provided a lot of the stone. And this, of course, is Jay Gould's mausoleum. And here you can see on the back of his advertising card, he lists the clients that gave him permission to advertise that he was the creator of their memorial. This advertising card is quite long. It gives you mausoleums in Greenwood, in other New Jersey, Atlanta, all over the country he was working. And the window that we see here on the left, we believe is a Tiffany window, and it is the Dodge family mausoleum. The next big monument company that comes into Woodlawn's world is Robert Caterson. And Caterson made a name for himself, first with building Leland Stanford's mausoleum out in California. His office was right outside the cemetery, so it was a great place for the elite to meet to plan for their mausoleum. And here you see two window samples from Caterson's installations. One is one that we hope to restore, and the other is the Art Mausoleum, which we believe may be a Tiffany. It's way up high, and we've got to get Brianne and Drew up there. Here you see the Huntington Mausoleum, excuse me, which was his masterpiece. In the 1890s, when his first wife passes, Huntington creates with Caterson what was considered the most valuable mausoleum in the country. At the time, it was $250,000. And again, it was when the Met was doing an exhibit on Herder, Tiffany, and Shatsy is, I think I've got his name right, Shasti, was who created Mrs. Huntington's bedroom and dressing room. And we've not been able to confirm whether or not this window is his creation, but it's really quite an extraordinary piece of art. This is Jules Bache Mausoleum. Again, it's Farrington, Gould, and Hoagland is the next big dog at Woodlawn. They did a lot of the major mausoleums because they're the first to bring big stone from, excuse me, from Barre, Vermont. Anyway, much to my surprise, I was on a bronze hunt and I was at Brown University looking at the Gorham collection, and I found records associated with the Bache window. So what we know is it's going to take another field trip to Brown, a careful look at Gorham to see their relationship in creating both the bronze framework on this Egyptian window, as well as the artist who contributed these beautiful panels. One of the things that we've done following the gift to Columbia of our records, is every time a monument company folds or we find out that the records are out there, we jump on it. We do have Caterson's records here. When they closed, I was given 2 weeks to pull everything out of there. And this is the Presby Leland collection. Presby Leland was a major monument company with offices in Nashville, Hartford, Connecticut, all over the country. And they did quite a bit of work here at Woodlawn. I think what was surprising to me as we were putting our program together is the diversity in the window styles. We know Presby Leland was Presby Kuykendall. They were Leland Hall, and then they merged into one firm. But I think as we get more into the Presby collection, we'll see a greater diversity of windows and extended stable of artisans who worked with this company. Of course, Tiffany's advertising catalog was extraordinarily helpful. In 1910, Tiffany lifts their windows and they will specifically identify the windows, some of the windows that are at Woodlawn. I think the client had to give permission if they wanted to be in the brochure. And this beautiful thing that you see on the right is the Osborne Mausoleum here. Again, it's a McKim Mead and White with a Tiffany interior. Andrew Dolkart, a wonderful professor at Columbia, as well as architectural historian, has been going through the records of the Architectural League. What we know is every year there was an annual exhibition. And initially I had just looked at designs of memorials and I didn't think about stained glass. Andrew's been going through the catalogs, and this is where he found references to the Belmont Mausoleum. Again, the Maitland Armstrong, Helen Maitland designed these windows, and there was a sense of pride. Initially, we thought that it was just bread and butter money to work at Woodlawn. No, you were on permanent exhibit. So for any artisan to contribute, you wanted to share that work downtown at a show before it was permanently installed here. Of course, with all of us, it's like, how am I going to find who made these things? I'll go to the Google. So I Googled and Googled, and then, of course, I turned to ProQuest, which is, as we know, the scanned newspapers and magazines, etc., to see if I could find anything. What I learned is it's important to search this topic by different names. It's stained glass, it's art glass, it's colored glass. You've got to put yourself back in the time period. And I realized that from many articles that this time period was also considered the revival of stained glass in America, basically the early 1900s. And this magazine, Public Opinion, has never been on my coffee table. There's all sorts of strange little magazines that focus and feature stained glass, and it's going to take us a lot of time. But the thing that is frightening to us, for those who are working on the research end, is that there's so few people that are voiced in stained glass, and that it was only my ability to recognize this because I've been at Woodlawn so long to make those connections. And I think that's the fear we have and why we feel it's so important to bring new scholars in, to share information, because those of us who know about this collection are getting on in years and thinking about going fishing. And we need to bring others in to help support this, as well as to really get new scholars involved in stained glass and artisans who aren't Lafarge and Tiffany. Of course, published books, windows at Woodlawn have been referenced in several publications. This is Alastair Duncan's work on Tiffany windows, where there is a long shopping list of things that are here. What we learned about this, Woodlawn, of course, has always opened its doors to the experts. And then, of course, many of our windows were missing. This was an unfortunate time period where Mr. Duncan did serve time for the theft of Woodlawn's windows. We are looking for windows. The FBI is still looking for windows, but it's also made us realize about the security of these works of art. We fortunately have a tremendous security force here. We patrol them regularly, but what the American cemeteries have learned is that if you share the collection, it is better secured than if you don't let anybody know what you've got. The information is out there, people can find it. And so we're very committed to sharing this collection with scholars and artists and the general public to make everyone the stewards of these works of art. And this is one of those surprise scraps. I was down at the Morse Museum looking up Tiffany Stone, and Robert Koch's papers had this little scrap in it where it says that Jay Gould's windows was one of the best Tiffany's out here. We didn't know if Jay Gould's window was a Tiffany. We know that he exhibited the window in the exhibition for raising funds for the pedestal for the Statue of Liberty in 1884. The window was created in 1884. And so we think this gives us a little confirmation that we have another Tiffany on our roster. We were surprised in the Morosini Mausoleum that there was actually a label where good old Schledermount is listed as the decorator. You Google that decorator and you find out he's a stained glass artisan. So there's been all sorts of strange places where we've found or confirmed attribution. And of course, to bring us to a close, its relationships are everything. The Fonsstock Mausoleum here, Peabody and Stearns are our architects. We know that they worked with Tiffany, but conveniently our records let us know that Charles Wills, the builder of Laurelton Hall, built the Fonsstock Mausoleum. He built Tiffany's home, which was his experimental workshop. No doubt you would have this extraordinary Tiffany mosaic inside, where Edwin Blashfield is the artist. And these two little Egyptian windows, which are just of extraordinary color, they date 1896 when the mausoleum was first built. The family redecorated in 1915 and put in the Blashfield mural. And without a doubt, the best way to know who your artist is to look for the signature. Here we have Lafarge and his assistant. And here's an array of some of the signatures that we found. We have learned that some of our lot owners imported their windows from Europe. There's a lot of Tiffany apprentices that are also represented at Woodlawn, and just some other firms that were here in New York City or in other parts of the country. So at this point, I want to turn it over to my colleagues who have started the physical investigation. It is our hope that as they investigate things and as we cross-reference monument dealers with time periods and the likelihood of various glass firms, that with the physical identification, we'll be able to narrow our field and really accomplish our goals of identifying artisans who aren't the major players, but did beautiful works, but also educating our lot owners to the significance of this collection, their responsibility as stewards, our responsibility to share this with people who love and study stained glass, and to protect this marvelous collection for centuries. We don't ever think decades at Woodlawn, we think centuries to come. So let me turn this over to Brianne and Drew.
Okay, everyone, hi. Again, my name is Brianne, and myself and Drew are the conservation consultants for this project at Woodlawn. And what that means is that we assess the condition of the windows and we provide ethical guidance for the care of the collection. As Susan said, and we can't overstate this enough, Woodlawn contains over 1,200 windows fabricated over a period of 150 years. This mosaic of images that you see is intended to describe the variety and evolution of style, design, and technique seen within Woodlawn's stained glass collection. We chose these images in order to illustrate the wide range of iconography favored in memorial traditions in this time period. As you know, again, can't overstate it enough, Woodlawn's stained glass collection is mainly comprised of windows by unidentified artists and designers from both the United States and Europe. Less than 10% of the stained glass artists and studios who have made windows for the cemetery have been identified, but windows sharing similar features such as the same design cartoon or stylistic or technical similitudes have been identified within the collection. For example, the left-hand image is a 1906 angel by Tiffany Studios appearing in the Hennon Mausoleum at Woodlawn. The design, or cartoon, which is the term used in stained glass, seen in the Hennon Mausoleum, was reused in the Moss Memorial window dating from 1907 at Christ Episcopal in Montpelier, Vermont, and again in 1913 in the DeWitt Memorial window at St. Andrew's Dune Church in Southampton, New York. there are likely other existing uses of this cartoon. Scholars and curators familiar with Woodlawn stained glass have attempted to link windows found in churches, private residences, and public buildings with the ones inside the cemetery. For example, Alice Cooney Frelinghausen, the American Decorative Arts curator at the Metropolitan Museum of Art, was able to match a window from St. Andrew's Dune Church in Southampton, as mentioned, seen on the left here, with the window within the Mausoleum plot of Woodlawn, shown on the right. She has located related windows in several other mausoleums in Philadelphia and in North Carolina, but there are no records yet to ascertain the identity of the studio who made them. It is our hope, however, through our work at Woodlawn, that we might be able to find answers to some of these questions. The deficit of records linking window fabricators to existing windows is what initiated the largest stained glass research project and survey ever undertaken in the United States. Our project aims to research, identify, and catalog the unknown craftsmen, examine the conditions of the windows and the environments in which they exist, establish treatment recommendations for the ongoing care of the windows and mausolea, and then ultimately carry out this work. The project relies on a collaborative approach between the professionals from Woodlawn Cemetery, the Metropolitan Museum of Art, Liberty Stained Glass Conservation, and Columbia University. In addition to the Avery Architecture and Fine Arts Library holding Woodlawn's archival collections, as Susan mentioned, for more than a decade, graduate students from the university's historic preservation program have documented mausoleum conditions and researched the structures, providing valuable insight into the history of the owner and their relationships with those who fabricated the memorials. These studies have often alerted cemetery staff to declining conditions and made recommendations for their stabilization. Under the supervision of Woodlawn's resident craftsmen, repairs are carried out. During the pilot phase, the Met, Columbia, Woodlawn, and Liberty assembled lists identifying several archives containing records that may be relevant to our project. These archives will be reviewed by our art historian. We, meaning the researchers, historians, and conservators, will work closely together to substantiate theories and make connections. By early 2020, the pilot phase began with funding provided by the Ventus Charitable Foundation. The pilot phase began with the review of a huge number of existing records, documentation, and photographs of the cemetery and mausoleums. 9 windows from various dates and locations were surveyed as an initial sampling of the range of objects, conditions, and environments. Customized field survey forms were created, and we modified them with each new condition or technical inclusion that we encountered. These surveys record each aspect of the window's condition with valuable information, including the type of setting, support methods, glass paint, lead, protective glazing, and the environment. The surveys are accompanied by extensive photographic documentation. The procedure for both surveying and the photography was developed in consideration of the forthcoming interactive geographic information or system, or GIS. The photography files are named to reflect the locations and conditions and will ultimately become searchable on Woodlawn's GIS map. Woodlawn's plots were developed chronologically. Research has established connections between monument dealers and stained glass studios, which we know. We have contemporary marketing materials from stained glass studios boasting relationships with the major monument makers of the period. Surveying windows according to the chronology of the plot allows the simultaneous review of contemporary monument dealers and stained glass studios to establish patterns and find repeating techniques, themes, materials, and window designs. It is also a really efficient way to do this and prevents Drew and I from traveling all great distances across the mausoleum, or across the Woodlawn. Working chronologically also helps us identify windows. The window design you see repeated here appeared in the Tiffany catalog. 3 separate C.E. Taitner mausoleums each have this memorial wreath motif. This tells us that C.E. Taitner, the monument company, not only had a relationship with Tiffany Studios, but was working with a catalog of designs that clients could choose from. Woodlawn had documentation for one of these windows identifying it as a Tiffany, which allowed us to attribute the others. We will undoubtedly see this design again from this time period and will be able to attribute it. Given the expanse of the collection, there is an understandable variety of materials. The windows exhibit pretty much every type of historic glass. All glass is made from the same ingredients, silica, flux, and lime, but it can be worked in many ways to create numerous colors, textures, and effects. One of the types of glass that we see is antique glass. Also known as mouth-blown glass, it is made through the traditional glass blowing process. Antique glass is transparent and it tends to have a lot of character, maybe like tiny bubbles called seeds or undulations resulting from the fabrication process. The left-hand window from the Carney Mausoleum is an example of antique mouth-blown glass. We also see rolled glasses, which can be transparent or semi-opaque and seen in a spectrum of colors and textures. Note the texture visible in the Gilmore Mausoleum window pictured in the center. This type of glass is made by pouring molten glass onto an iron table and rolling it flat. In order to produce the texture, the rollers are modeled. Opalescent glass, popularized in America by Tiffany and Lafarge, is a semi-opaque glass produced by measures like manipulating cooling periods or using different additives. Opalescent glass can be solid, colored, or a mix of hues, which are combined when the glass is hot. The right-hand photograph shows a 1904 Lafarge window using several colors of opalescent glass. We encounter many glass jewels. The panel on the left is an ornate cross set within a field of red opalescent glass. The cross is comprised of small, delicate pieces of glass and emboldened with faceted and cast jewels. We see every possible size of lead. Some windows use one size only, while others, like the example in the middle, use a combination of several lead sizes. This was a design choice consciously employed to create areas of negative space and bold lines. We also see interesting additions like lead cast appliques as seen in the right-hand image. Appliques are noteworthy and they are difficult to reproduce. Although I have focused on lead, it is not the only material used as a matrix in stained glass windows at Woodlawn. We also encounter copper foil and zinc. We see all manner of glass paint and enamels. Glass paint or vitreous paint is made up of ground glass and metallic oxides. The powder is mixed with a medium. It could be water, lavender oil, or vinegar, and a binder. The paint is fired and the particles of ground glass melt and fuse to the substrate glass, permanently holding the pigment in place. Vitreous glass includes grisaille, which are dark paint colors used to make trace lines, and matte. The left-hand photograph is from the Harkness Mausoleum window by artist Helen Maitland Armstrong. The brownish black paint in the background, clothing, wings, and inscription is grisaille paint. The glass used is antique. Stained glass also uses a form of paint known as enamels. Enamels are vitreous paints made of ground-colored glass, and the color palette available through enamel paint is much more diverse, as seen in the Ascension window on the far right. It is also seen in the flesh pieces that face and hands of the Helen Maitland Armstrong window on the left. We have encountered windows containing unusual materials not widely used in historic stained glass. This window shown is from Christian Herder's mausoleum dating to about 1885. The majority of the window is not made of glass, but actually utilizes thinly sliced alabaster and other translucent stone materials. The stone is leaded together in the traditional way, and the window uses cast and faceted jewels. The far right image shows how the exterior of the window has weathered from exposure of the elements. The styles, techniques, and materials in the stained glass collection vary immensely. The plots we have surveyed so far generally cover the period between 1898 and 1925, with a few later inclusions. There are a great deal of landscapes in these mausolea. Landscapes were popular during that period of stained glass and are also an appealing subject matter for an eternal resting place. The range of styles used within the landscape is broad. On the left, we have a landscape from the Chestnut Hill plot, which uses plated opalescent glass to communicate the details of the design. There is no painted decoration. Without the use of glass paint to articulate detail, the lead is what provides the structure to the artwork. The center panel, also from Chestnut Hill, is the opposite. The impressionistic design relies heavily on the use of glass paint and enamels. The glass here is not opalescent, but rather it is a transparent antique glass. Please note the absence of the lead lines. Instead of the puzzle-like assembly seen in the left panel, this landscape uses glass paint panels assembled almost like canvases together. On the right hand, the landscape interpretation uses glass paint and a more traditional lead matrix. The modern color palette and painting style are reflective of the mid-century period. The styles employed in the figural panels are broad. In any mausoleum window, the subject matter chosen reflects the personal religious beliefs of the person interred. The figural windows at Woodlawn represent everything from specific Bible verses, portraits of saints or angels, or even portraits of the mausoleum owner. The left-hand example is a Gothic revival style window. The pointed tops of the lancets and use of the tracery is typical for this style. The traditional Gothic color palette is employed, as well as the medallions that take up small sections of the overall lancet to illustrate specific scenes. The angel made of opalescent glass in the center uses very small lead lines and specially made glass textures. The face, hands, flowers, and details in the sky above were executed using glass paint and enamel. The painting style is very delicate. The overall layout of the window is also noteworthy. The angel is truncated at the wings and the knees, and it almost feels like a zoomed in view of an image. On the right, we have a modern style window from the 1960s. The bright, blocky background and bolder painting style are representative of that period. Variety continues within the windows classified as ornamental. On the left, there's a delicate Art Nouveau design using opalescent glass and swirling shapes outlined in lead. The center example, also opalescent glass, is a geometric fish scale design which uses bold complementary colors. The panel on the far right is an impressionistic still life. The lead was used to create a geometric grid, but the painted floral design spills out and through the adjacent boxes. The painting is softly executed and has an ethereal quality. The windows at Woodlawn often have some form of exterior protection. Protection can be in the form of a secondary glazing layer, as seen on the left. These types of secondary glazing layers vary. We have encountered safety glass, which is what you're seeing now on the left, as well as plain window glass and even plastic. Exterior protection often appears as bronze exterior grills. These grills are often extremely decorative, as seen in the center and right images, and there are windows that have both protection glass and bronze grills, as seen on the right, as well as windows that have no form of exterior protection. The types of settings also vary. Some of the windows open. The image on the left illustrates a large casement, which is a window that opens on hinges like a door. The windows that open often have protection bars on the exterior, meaning that the window opens to the interior of the mausoleum and is not a form of egress. Thus, the operable capability was to provide ventilation to the space, or perhaps to allow access to both sides of the window for cleaning or maintenance. The center window is also an example of an operable window. Note the shadows cast on the glass from the exterior protection bars. Most of the windows do not open, however. Many windows are set directly into the stonework in the traditional way, as illustrated in the right-hand image. Other windows are set by using frames. The frames are usually made of bronze or steel, but we have found a few examples of zinc frames as well. The environments of the mausoleums directly affect the condition of the stained glass. The images shown are from a mausoleum in the Chapel Hill plot. With significant leakage issues, there is water infiltrating through the masonry joints, the roof, and around the window frame. As a result, moisture sits on the stained glass for long periods of time and accelerates its degradation. Note the paint loss in the figure's face and the drip-shaped losses in the clouds. Here are three more examples within very damp environments and the subsequent effects moisture has had on the glass paint. On the left, the enamel in the angel's face, hair, and arms has been affected. In the center, the enamel that once provided detail in the lilies has been mostly lost, as well as the paint in the border decoration. On the right, the enamel paint on the head and hands of the figure has been lost, rendering the figure unreadable. It is no longer clear who the figure is intending to be. Beyond the home of art and architecture, Woodlawn is also home to a lot of wildlife, including insects. Insects make their way in between plates of glass and lay larvae, as evidenced on the photo on the left. Also, sadly, as Susan also mentioned, vandalism is an issue. The window on the right was broken when someone attempted to steal the bronze grill bars. There is a hole in the window, as a result, allowing rainwater, leaves, dirt, and small animals the ability to gain entrance into the mausoleum. Although there are other concerning conditions that I've just illustrated, there are plenty of dry mausoleums with windows that are in excellent condition. Each of these three examples are near perfect, with no breaks, buckling of lead, paint loss issues, or really any signs of age. During our examinations, we often come across random anomalies. We have encountered quite a few windows that were installed either backwards or upside down. This suggests that the original installation crew was different than the stained glass studio who made the window. The panel on the left, shown in detail in the upper center image, was installed backwards and the glass paint was facing the exterior. There is no protective glazing, so the paint has been exposed to the elements for many years and is now mostly lost. The lower center image is a detail from the Gothic revival window that we looked at earlier. Note the signature, which is backwards. Only this panel was installed backwards within the window. The window on the right is one of the 3 Tiffany windows using the same cartoon that I also showed you earlier, but I flipped the image to show you how similar the designs were. In reality, it was installed upside down and appears like the image you see on the right. Now that you've seen all the conditions of the windows, or some of the windows, the next question is, how will we care for them? The collection demonstrates an array of conditions not typically seen together at the same site. Each mausoleum and window condition is unique, so they must be prescribed treatment individually. A blanket approach cannot work at Woodlawn. Our approach to treatment is a conservative one. The inherent value of historic stained glass lies within original materials and craftsmanship. The words conservation and restoration are separate terms and cannot be used interchangeably. Restoration means to restore something back to a previous period, and it tends to eliminate original and historic materials. Conservation is to conserve what is existing now with an emphasis on retaining existing material rather than trying to fully eliminate the appearance of age. It is possible to maintain a conservative approach respecting the integrity of original workmanship and materials while also making a positive aesthetic impact. For example, the image on the left shows the before and after of a panel from a window from Trinity Wall Street that was repaired using epoxy resin to bond original pieces back together. You can see the elimination of the repair leads in the ox's face. This is a conservative approach that retains the existing materials but enhances the aesthetic and readability of the window. A restoration approach in this context would replace the broken piece. The image on the right illustrates how lost glass paint can be renewed using a technique called conservation plating. This process includes a very thin piece of clear glass called a plate, which is painted, infilling areas of lost design only. The plate is then integrated into the window to refresh the design without moving, removing, or modifying the original painted piece. Our conservation strategy at Woodlawn places an emphasis on research and documentation, repair over replacement, reversibility of treatment procedures, and preventative conservation. Aesthetic features are reinstated where needed while preserving the integrity of the original materials. Our intention is to keep Woodlawn as original as possible for future generations. To date, 3 full plots over 100 windows have been surveyed, and the project is ongoing and evolving. Engagement with lot owners has stirred interest in the assessment process, and specific mausoleums will undergo conservation treatment as early as this year. Conservation work will be undertaken alongside the continuing survey and research process. The benefits of the project are twofold. Our research will contribute to the collective knowledge of several disciplines, such as stained glass, architectural and art history, the history of the city of New York, historic preservation and conservation studies, and our physical surveying and treatment plans will conserve the most important stained glass collection in America for future generations. It is our sincere hope that the knowledge collecting during this campaign will honor and strengthen the history and culture of Woodlawn and that of New York City. Thank you guys very much for your time. If you or your family or you know someone who has a stained glass window at Woodlawn, please reach out to one of us. Here are our emails. We love to engage and answer any questions that you might have. We're on a quest for information, so if you think you might have records pertaining to your mausoleum, we would love to see them. This is truly a collaborative effort. Thank you.
That was just fascinating. Thank you so much. I'm sure there are other questions. I'd like to start with a non-technical question. Don't you find it extraordinary that people put all this investment and this beauty into places that they weren't going to see? You know, the family would see it, but this is to your honor and you're out of there.
To be perfectly honest, Peg, it's the damnedest thing. These mosaics and doors and the fact that they're laying in there with their little eyes closed, not seeing this. But I think what's so important about the windows is the ability to tell the family story and preserve the legacy. You know, we have some that have the family crest in it, their religious beliefs, etc. And what you have to understand about cemeteries is people actually thought people would be visiting forever. Christ in the Garden of Gethsemane is the #1 window here at Woodlawn. So whether that was prevalent, whether or not we can research and say it's people of a certain faith, whether that's Presbyterians use that or Episcopals use that, that's what's fascinating about the study in computers, that we have the ability to kind of share these stories as to why you thought that window was important for your family to see when they came visit.
You've got funding for the study, but say I discovered that the angel window in my family mausoleum needed help. Is that up to me to pay for, or does Woodlawn have funding?
Technically, the state of New York says these are your responsibility. Fortunately, a good portion of these mausolea are endowed. And with the use of the endowment funds, of course, families never endowed the windows for the most part. They endowed the building. So right now, anything that Drew and Brianne have found is at risk is being restored. We are boots on the ground, taking care of the roofs to stabilize all these buildings is the #1 thing that we've done, primarily with endowment funds. So now those who have large endowments, we are reaching out to them to say, can we use your endowment interest to restore your window? And what's exciting about it is some of these, there's great fear that the window cost is going to be extraordinary. It's not with most of them. With some, yes, but with most of them, no. And what we feel is if we can partner with our lot owners, they'll be willing to invest in the project. We've got a major event coming up in September for our lot owner descendants where they'll meet our stained glass team and hopefully step into that world of how much is this going to cost and what am I going to do? For those that are abandoned, though, that's one of the reasons for attribution. Is it possible to get a grant to restore our Tiffany windows or to restore, to package them together with the knowledge that we're going to share them with the public and scholars? So that's one of the key things as far as fundraising for the project.
Does Woodlawn have the ability to intervene quickly if you see an endangered window, like the one broken at the attempted theft?
Yes, we do.
Did you leave it like that, or did you fix it?
It needs to be fixed. We have several that they've discovered that need immediate intervention. And again, we're going to package them together to the best that we can do with the cost. Also, we'll be bidding out some of the projects. There are certain windows that are right for certain conservators, certain windows that need to be handled by others. And we need to be cautious about that as far as the technique of construction and the glass that was used.
I see that Alice Friedlinghausen is with us. Alice, nice to have you with us today.
It's nice to be with you as well, and lovely presentation, Susan and Brianne, and just great. No, it's an extraordinary collection. It really is, and I've been fortunate to be part of some of this, and hopefully can have a little more time to work on it.
No, you were the inspiration for this. So why don't you tell a little bit about how you got involved in Woodlawn and got us going?
Oh my gosh, you mean, well, I mean, actually it does kind of go back just a little ways when, I mean, this is a very personal story, but my mother-in-law died and wanted to be buried, excuse me, at her family's mausoleum at Woodlawn. And so I thought, well, my husband and I, okay, let's go up and just see what the mausoleum looks like. I mean, literally, and we happened to be lucky enough to have gone in the back entrance, and there's a building right there if you go in the back entrance of Woodlawn, or at least not the one where normally you would sort of come in. And I popped out and knocked on the door, and there was Susan, and she was working on all the historic records. And so I said, well, hi there, we're interested in seeing this mausoleum. She said, well, I'll hop in the car and take you, as she would do to anybody who walked in the door. And we went up to the mausoleum, and she said, do you want me to get the key? Do you want to go inside? I said, oh, no, gosh, heavens no. She said it would all be tidied up by the time my mother-in-law was, is ready to bring her there. And so we take a walk around the mausoleum, and I see that very clearly there's a Tiffany window there. And it's Christ in Majesty was the subject of it. And I said, well, if you do have a key, yes, let's go take a look at this. And so we did go in, and it was then, and this is the window, the mausoleum dates in the window dated about 1897, I think. And it was kind of extraordinary that you know, my mother-in-law knew that I was a Tiffany scholar. I mean, that I've been working this, and had never thought to kind of let me know about the stained glass window in the mausoleum. And she might not really have ever thought about it, but it just shows you how sometimes even lot owners can be so disconnected from the artwork that's actually within their mausoleum. And unfortunately, this window had been vandalized. The head had been broken, and it was very poorly, let's call it restored. It was not conserved. It was really poorly restored. So it was a kind of eye opener in terms of the condition of a number of these windows. And then Susan and I have been in contact over the years, communication about this. And I was, you know, very lucky to be invited to write about the stained glass windows of Woodlawn. Can you imagine that job? 1,200 windows, and try to pick some that you're going to write about. It was quite extraordinary. It was just the tip of the iceberg. I mean, there's so much left to do, and certainly what Brianne and Drew are discovering through their examination is really, really exciting. So sorry.
No, and I
Thank
think
you.
for us at Woodlawn, the cemeteries, you know, our ignorance as to what's in our collections, and the good fortune of being in New York City, where you have the level of scholarship and you have the trained conservators to advise you, is absolutely, you know, fantastic. Because most of our mausoleum owners, everybody thinks they've got a Tiffany window. That's my Tiffany window. It's like, no, it's not. But for us to be able to start telling them, no, you have a whatever window, is extraordinary. And that's the thing, is if we can facilitate this project to get this information, I know that our effort to get our landowners to come back and care about these items is going to be tremendously successful. But it's because of the scholarship and the trained professionals that we have in the city.
Well, Brianne or Drew, what type of glass would be the most difficult and costly to restore? You discussed the different types.
I'd say this. The type of glass doesn't necessarily dictate the type of work that might be done. So cost-wise, it probably doesn't affect too much the windows. Perhaps some Tiffany glasses are a little bit trickier. But I would say just the overall condition of the window is what really dictates the cost of any conservation. If the leads are deteriorated or the paint's lost, or so the type of glass, the treatments are quite similar, even in various types of glass.
What surprised you the most looking at the windows? What didn't you expect? What really excited you when you discovered it?
Bree?
Every day is a complete and total different day. I kind of touched upon this a little in the presentation, but it is wild. You know, typically when you enter a church, there's some scheme packed. I mean, of course, memorial windows, you know, are added over time and they can be wildly different from one another, but they're still within the same building. At Woodlawn, each individual mausoleum is a tiny building with its own complete set of conditions. So there's a lot of work to be done with consideration to the environment and how we are going to create a really good treatment plan as such. So Woodlawn, the stained glass is special in and of itself, but really where it lives in each individual environment is surprising. We've seen a lot of surprises and a lot of critters and bugs. There's a lot of bugs. A lot of bugs.
Many of the mausoleums are over 100 years old. Does the family own the plot in perpetuity? And again, Susan, you mentioned that some have been abandoned or lost. Are you also trying to track down family members?
Yes, basically the land is owned by Woodlawn. You do not own your family lot. You own burial rights. But in the eyes of the state of New York, the memorial is owned by the family. So when I first reached out to the descendants of George M. Cohan, they're like, well, can we sell our Tiffany windows? It's like, no, but it's a very gray area. They are their windows. And, you know, their solution was, let's sell the windows and restore the mausoleum. It's like, it was not your great grandfather's intent to break this thing up. So our job is, number one, to encourage the family to partner with us to do something about the condition of the building. If anyone wanted to take their windows out, we would fight them in court and we would win. There's no question there. But that's sort of, you know, how that goes. As far as abandonment, one of the major parts of my job and my role in this project is tracking down the descendants. You know, genealogy is my love and passion, and I love to hunt them down. And then from there, it's the surprise. And it's always the same way. I send them a little letter, I send them some pictures, and then this car will drive into Woodlawn and security will say, oh, somebody's coming to look at the Harkness Mausoleum. I jump in the golf cart and go get them. And that's what we do. Is it's always that fear, as well as there's embarrassment when people finally go to the effort to go to great grandpa's mausoleum. They're embarrassed that they haven't been there before, that they haven't cared in generations. And people need to get over that. We don't expect that. It's America. We go forward and we change. And fortunately, we live in an ancestry.com world right now. People are researching their heritage and their legacy. And it's a great time for people to re-engage and come back. So we're capitalizing on that in a big way.
Are people building mausoleums today?
What's surprising is they're not custom done. They're basically generated out of Barre, Vermont, or a couple other locations in the country. So you'd go to your monument dealer, you would look at the catalog, you'd pick one of those, and it would arrive on a flatbed truck. Back in the olden days, they were built on site. We've got some wonderful pictures where, you know, there were 300 mausoleums being built here at any given year. And there'll be bits and pieces all over the place. And you needed the permission of your neighbor to put your columns and steps in their yard while your mausoleum was being constructed.
One of the wonderful things that you do up there is take people on tours and let people in to see these wonderful interiors. Has that been stopped, I assume, through COVID, and are you starting up again?
We're back in business again with, you know, the most popular tours, illuminated mausoleums. When we light them up, we are very active and have been since the inception in Open House, New York, where we share the buildings. There are some of our mausoleum owners that want to keep their property private, and that's fine and that's good. And there's others who are like, pick me for the open house. And so we're able to share those. And then there's many that have been deeded back to the cemetery, like the Belmont Mausoleum, which we open regularly. But even though it's, well, I guess we're, you know, we're just so eager to share. And we know that we're not eligible for grant support for this project unless the general public can see these. We also know that we've got 28 incoming Columbia graduate students that start in a couple of weeks who will do brilliant studies on these things. And we would never get through all that paper and present these cases without these marvelous students doing these projects for us. So we're very liberal in sharing the properties and very conservative at the same time.
Speaking through getting through all this stuff, how long is it going to take to really study all these windows?
I'm looking at retiring, I hope, in 3 years, but I'm not leaving until we're done. I think, you know, that's the thing, is if we can get 400 or 500 done a year, then it's, you know, it's basically a five to 6 year project. I think that the research component will be longer and ongoing forever, though, because there's always that scrap of information in some bizarre repository somewhere else that identifies these windows, or a family member who comes up, this was grandma's file on Woodlawn, that then shares the information with us. That part of the project will be forever.
Well, Brianne and Drew, what drew you into stained glass conservation?
Shall I go first? Well, my background is actually in in art. I spent several years at art school, so I did work in stained glass for some time then, and I actually had an interest in painting conservation for a while, but as luck would have it, there was a stained glass course in London that for conservation that I spotted and applied, and somehow managed to get on the course, and that was many years ago now. So I didn't wake up one morning and decide that's what I wanted to do. It was more by happy accident.
Yeah, I did my undergraduate in history of art, and that's when I was first exposed to stained glass. And I was really taken with the duality between beauty and function, and how those two things can, offer simultaneously a part of a building envelope. So when I graduated college, it was 2010, which was not a great time. So graduate school was kind of an option. And I'm a practical person. I've always been good with my hands, and conservation was sort of where I was steered from a very good college professor. And I studied abroad in undergraduate English. I really liked England. So I applied to the University of York, and they took me in, and that's kind of how the whole thing happened. It was a series of decisions, but now it's, my life's work, and I hope very much to be able to have a positive impact on our nation's glass heritage, because it is sometimes a little bit overlooked compared to other conservation trades. So I would like very much to advocate for stained glass and its ethical care.
Mm-hmm. And we're just about hitting our time, but just one final question. Is there a great stained glass artist today that people want in their very own mausoleum?
There's a lot of wonderful stained glass artists operating right now. So I don't know if there's one who specifically markets to that, but that could be my ignorance. I think in contemporary society, stained glass is sort of more in public spaces, and mausoleums tend to be private spaces. I don't know, Drew, do you have a thought?
No, you're absolutely right. There's much more architectural glass getting made now than ecclesiastical or mausoleum type glass. So there are plenty of artists who would be capable of doing that, and plenty of studios that would be, but I don't know that it's quite so popular now as it was in the past.
But I do think a number of contemporary artists are really drawn to the medium of stained glass, and I'm thinking, I think it's pretty much Candy Wiley, who did the new put a fantastic installation in the new Penn Station. The artist Stephen Hannock was recently commissioned to do a stained glass window, a landscape window for St. Andrew's Dune Church, which the reason there's so much on that is because I've got a book just about to come out on those windows. That's not a plug, but
my next album. I think it's interesting for us, I would say, and I don't know who made the window, but Celia Cruz's window, which was donated by the talk show host Christina, is just a fabulous work of art, and it's very contemporary and it's very brilliant. And so I think that's one of the things that's important that we learn from this is not only do we need to protect the artwork that was done a century ago, but we need to celebrate the new things and the new memorials that are being created for people at Woodlawn.
That's terrific. And if there are spirits floating around Woodlawn, I'm sure they're really enjoying the beauty, and they probably enjoyed today's talk too. Thank you so much, Susan, Brianne, Drew, and Alice. And I hope we see people on a in-person Sacred Sites open house next year, and hope we see you on Woodlawn. Thank you so much. And thanks everybody.
Thank you so much for having us today. Bye, everybody.